I'm Phil Rickaby, and I've been a writer and performer for almost 30 years. But I've realized that I don't really know as much as I should about the theatre scene outside of my particular Toronto bubble. Now, I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about the theatre scene across Canada. So join me as I talk with mainstream theatre creators you may have heard of and indie artists you really should know, as we find out just what it takes to be stage-worthy. If you value the work that I do on Stageworthy, please consider leaving a donation either as a one-time thing or on a recurring monthly basis. Stageworthy is created entirely by me, and I give it to you free of charge with no advertising or other sponsored messages. Your continuing support helps me to cover the cost of producing and distributing the show. Just 4 people donating $5 a month would help me cover the cost of podcast hosting alone. Help me continue to bring you this podcast. You can find a link to donate in the show notes, which you can find in your podcast app or at the website at stageworthy.ca. Now, on to the show. Tracy Michailidis is an actor and singer based in Toronto. In this conversation, we talk about Theatre Myth Collective's Ingenue, fighting the idea that musical theatre actors aren't real actors, and finding life balance in a theatre career. After recording this episode, Tracy had to withdraw from the production of Ingenue due to a family circumstance, and it was announced that Mari Bab will step into her role. Ingenue runs from May 25th to June 4th at Toronto's Red Sandcastle. Now, here's my conversation with Tracy Michailidis. Just to jump straight in, could you tell me about, is it Ingenue? Is that how it, because it's Ingenue, there's some brackets in there. Tell me about this show.
Yes, Ingenue, yeah. That's Evan Chichis, who's the writer and director. It's about a woman who is mid-life, mid-career, who has played many ingenues, all the ingenues, she says, like in plays, Shakespeare, Juliet, Cordelia, in musicals like Maria in The Sound of Music, Maria in West Side Story. She's played, Nina in The Seagull. I mean, she has played all the ingenues. And she's suddenly in her mid-40s and can't work, can't get a job, because she's still kind of living in the role of wanting to stay young. And it sort of ties into what's been going on in her life and her making a step sort of psychologically to move on to being an adult. So it's, like a dark comedy, maybe I would call it. Yeah.
Is it, I mean, Ingenue is the young actor. Is it a show about coming to terms with no longer being the ingenue? Is it a show about, dare I say, getting older? What is the show about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and I don't want to give too much away about the play but I will say there are 3 women in the cast, and I am of the middle in terms of our chronological ages in this piece and as people. So there is someone who is more, quote, the ingenue age, and then there is someone who is older than me. And so I think it's about aging, but I think it's also about how we identify ourselves. I think with women, right, this is not with theater, but it's like, I think it's like maiden, goddess, and crone. And I believe the crone is like, I think at 40, you become a crone. And this idea, but that the crone also holds a lot of wisdom, right? I got to play the witch in Into the Woods a little while ago. And my way sort of into that part, because like sort of putting on a voice and being witchy I didn't really know how to do that. But I really started reading stuff about crones and that sort of wisdom that someone has later in their lives, and stepping into that. Which I think is part of what this is about too. So not just about getting older, but what the responsibilities are of getting older, and also the things we can free ourselves of, right, when we get older.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I know a lot of women as they get older They say I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't give a fuck
Yeah,
anymore.
I can swear. I wasn't sure. I was going to swear.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
let's just let it out. We don't have any kind of like regulations about that. It's
I
the
do
internet.
not. No.
But yeah, it's like I don't give a fuck anymore. I could say what I want. I could do what I want.
Yeah, totally. I definitely feel that. I mean, I was just writing. It was World Theater Day the other day, and I posted a picture of a show that I just done, and I was like, I feel both like it becomes more sacred to me, like art and theater, and also like I give a shit less. Like I just don't give a shit in the same way. But it's also more sacred. Like it's that balance, right? Where it's like I value how much it means to me and what it is in this world, art, and at the same time, yeah, it's like fuck, like you do your best. It's a play. It's like just being reminded of that too. And
yeah. Absolutely. And this is being done at one of my favorite little theaters in Toronto, the Red Sandcastle Theatre, which is an incredibly intimate space to be doing a musical in.
It is. Yes. We did our trailers there. I'd seen a couple plays there, but I didn't get to go backstage, and I went downstairs, and it's got good energy, that space. I really like it. I was like, this is going to be, yes, we're going to be right there in front of the audience. And I've done musicals in big theaters, but I love doing musicals in intimate spaces. I just think it requires a certain level of bravery from both the audience and the actors, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's something about that space. And I know people who've been going to do shows in there, and they're unprepared for how intimate that is, how close you are to the audience.
Yeah.
Because they're right there. Like you could, for the most part, reach out and touch somebody in the front row. There's no division. So it's like, there's no hiding. There's no hiding in that space, which is awesome.
No, it's very true. I just did a production of Sweeney Todd that we brought to Buenos Aires. We brought it to Argentina, and it was immersive, and the audience was right there in front of us. It's very similar. We had 32 people at each play, and we would move them into different spaces, and they were an arm's length away from me. Sometimes I would touch them. I fed them pies. I mean, it was terrifying, but exhilarating. This is why we do it, right?
There's something about that show and feeding people pies. That's something.
Yeah, it was great. And I mean, we were in Argentina, so the meat pies were empanadas, which was perfect.
Right. Yes. Yeah. As far how long have you been working on this show? Because I know that Evan's been working on it for a little while.
I did the first reading. I want to say a while ago, like maybe at least 5 years ago, maybe 8. And I've done a few readings since then as Evan's been developing it. And then of course, COVID, there was a hiatus. And we did a reading, of the script that is close to what we're going to be doing soon. Just about a couple months ago. Because, as Evan and I spoke about, like the last couple of years, COVID, but also in terms of identity, in terms of even being a woman, we were talking about this, like I was saying, being a woman in her 40s, like now compared to 10 years ago, even in this industry, things have changed. It's in a good way, I think, right? Like you see women who are middle-aged who are, leading TV series, right? And that we're having a little bit of a shift, which is great. So we talked about that, and he's made some adjustments to the script, and we're still developing it. We're getting into rehearsal in like just under a month. We start rehearsals.
Wow. Just as you talk about like television and things like that, I'm reminded that if the TV show Golden Girls, those characters were all supposed to be 50.
Yeah. Most,
and that blows my mind because they dress them like they're much older.
Yeah, they're very, like, I'm 50, and like like those, I mean, it was a different time, definitely hairstyles and stuff like that. But I have to say, I rewatched all of them during COVID, all the Golden Girls. And I mean, it's brilliant. It's so good. And those women, it really like trailblazing too. Like I knew it was funny. I got jokes that I didn't maybe get when I was like 13 years old, but some of the issues they dealt with on that show, I was really impressed. And yeah, they do like the fashion sense and all of that is kind of wild, but I love that, like, they're talking about having sex. And because back then when I was 13, I was like, how can they be talking about that?
Right.
Now I'm 50. Right. I'm like, of course they're talking about that.
Yeah. No, The whole thing with the issues that they dealt with and the clothes that they were wearing, and the fact that they were doing all that. They were trailblazers and they were brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right that some things are changing theater wise. So things go a little faster, for the whole like being older thing, but that's all right. One of the things that I know that I wanted to talk about, and it's one of the things that you mentioned, was about the terrible stereotype about actors who are musical theater actors, they're not real actors, which is like so terrible. But I mean, even so much as so the show, so many TV shows have followed that trope, where they here's a festival and the theater actor, the musical actors are coming in and they're all so dumb, it's just like this thing so bad. But I wish I knew where that came from. How do you combat that?
Yeah, I mean, and I think I'll say this, like, even like, and I was an English major. I'm very particular sometimes, not in a good, like, about words, but even like being called a musical theater actor, I just think even that's weird. I'm like, I'm an actor and I am in musicals and I am in plays, but like, you don't say, they're a Chekhovian actor and they're a Shakespearean actor, right? Like that and I think part of me thinks sometimes it's when we're afraid, we categorize things. I think we put things into boxes because it makes us feel like we need to put something in its place. I mean, how do I combat it? I'll also answer like, why do I think it comes? I think some of it comes from, I think sometimes it comes from like actors like who maybe feel like afraid of singing because maybe they don't feel like they're good enough or brave enough or whatever. And so sometimes it comes from like a fear, I think, of just like right? Like sometimes we put things below us if we need to feel stronger or better. Sometimes I wonder about that. I mean, there are actors who, and you get into that whole thing. It's like, what is a bad actor? I don't even know, right? It's so subjective. We all have actors we like and actors we don't, and that's what it is. And I think whether you see that actor perform in a musical or a play, we're also allowed to have plays that we're shitty in. Like, it's like part of it is like learning, and this is sort of a little thing that Ingenue deals with is like talking about failure. Like, how do we learn? And we have to learn by trying. And I think sometimes, with the character that I'm playing in Ingenue, right? Like I think has been doing really well doing this particular thing. So part of the need to keep playing that part is because she knows she's good at it. And it's easier sometimes to do the thing that you can do it rather than stretch out and try something new. I mean, in terms of how I combat it or how I deal with it as an actor, I think I try to, as best I can, like try to do musicals and plays, like, so, just do the work that speaks to me, and try to do that for me because I like doing both. And as a teacher, like try to model that to some extent for students of mine who, I think as an actor you do though, like for me, I've had to a couple times, if I was continually doing musicals, tell my agent at the time, you know what, I want to do a play right now. So I need to not do a musical for a while because I need to change. If people see me in a certain way, then I need to change that. And maybe I can change that by choosing different kinds of roles. So I think we have some power, I think, in that way as actors, right? To curate what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember in the ancient times when I was at theater school, we our school essentially told us at that time, listen, your job is to be an actor. And in this industry, in this country, that means that you should be able to do Shakespeare, you should be able to do musicals, and you should be able to do like a straight up play. And just because we tell you that you need to be able to do musicals doesn't mean you have to be able to sing, but you should be able to carry a tune or to sell a song.
Yeah.
And so like they very much were strict on like be able to do all three.
Wow, that's cool though. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, sometimes there's been a bit of a shift, right? Like I remember shows like Hadestown. I remember when that casting notice came out, and there are a few musicals like this where they would say no musical theater voices, right? Or no musicals. And of course we've got like pop, rock, alternative music. And I think, which is great because there are different kinds of voices and we're not having to fit a certain prototype. And, you know, I worked for Disney for 2 years. I'm not knocking Disney, but there's a certain sound associated with that, right? And not everybody has that naturally. And I think it's important, you know, we can be, as actors, we can be mimics and do that, but then do something else too, to develop your own voice.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole no musical theater voices, I'm reminded of like the original cast of Rent was hired because they weren't musical theater performers at the time. And then they became.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. I mean, see, so that like, and then they write shows. Yeah. And then they write shows. Okay, let's write it like a show. And let's like Idina sings like this. So let's write this and let's do this. And yeah, exactly. That can happen. And of course, I remember seeing Neil Patrick Harris do Rent at La Jolla, and he's done a lot of musicals and stuff. So he, you know, he was different, but wonderful as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. One of the things that I know is important to you is the balance between art and life, because we all have to do, we have to, you know, we want to create art, we want to create theater, but we also have lives. I kind of feel that for some people, although the pandemic was a terrible experience for a lot of people, the one thing that it did do was sort of force a lot of people to sit back and figure out who they are outside of the industry.
Yeah.
And whether or not we can carry that through, because once the treadmill of production starts going, it gets a lot harder to do that. For you, what is important about the work-life balance there, the art-life balance, and how do you maintain that?
That is a great question, Phil. I mean, I will say that like at the beginning of when COVID first, you know, March 20, whatever it was, a couple of years ago, I was tired. I was a bit burnt out. So I was grateful to have time to be quiet and to hang out with my family and not have the decision to make, oh, do I take this job because I'm going away? Like that was freed from me. And I didn't, and my ego wasn't, you know, going, oh, the phone's not ringing because nobody no, the phone wasn't ringing. There were no phones. Like it was like, so it was a sort of built in, and I really felt like I really needed that rest. And I try to do that, like even before COVID, to give myself time to like take a vacation, to rest, because I find, and of course you rest and you get creative ideas lying on a beach or walking in the woods. And it all serves, it is good for your creative spirit, I think, to do it. But the act of taking time off or spending money on a trip or stuff, I always find it like, I always have like cold feet about it. And I never regret it. Yeah, my family, I mean, I come from a big Greek family and we're all really close. And during COVID, we spent a lot of time together, which was really nourishing for me. Yeah, I mean, I try, like if stuff's going on in my family, if someone in my family is going through a hard time, I will, and I have said no to jobs that take me out of Toronto. I love traveling. I love working across Canada and beyond. But yeah, for me, I have felt like there have been times when a family member was sick or that I couldn't in good faith even go to a place like Stratford. It just felt too far. And the work we do is so, I find it all encompassing. And so I know that even if I'm 2 hours away, I'm going to be like absorbed in a world and I'll be absent in a way from my family. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I've been doing this now like 30 years, I guess. It'll be 30 years in 94. In 2024 will be 30 years. And I remember going to Charlottetown that summer and being really like, everyone was in good health and stuff, but I was just really afraid of something happening because I felt very far away. And there were no cell phones, or I don't think maybe I had a computer, but it wasn't like I wasn't on my laptop. So it really felt like I was going off like to, I don't know, like a Siberia, like Hodel and Fiddler on the Roof. I felt like I was going off to someplace. But I think also the good thing about traveling and doing that early on for me and for us is we also have to live our lives. And so finding a way to, and my parents have always been really supportive of me doing this work. So coming away, coming back, was that too far? Okay, I can try going further this time. Like a constant balance. Yeah.
You know, you were mentioning about how all-encompassing it can be, and what it's understandable because every time you join a cast, you form a family, you form a temporary family, and the hours are long and the work is intense. So of course, it becomes all-encompassing, and so sometimes it can be hard to remember to call your family, call your partner, call like this sort of stuff. But it's so important to do both.
Totally. Yeah. And I do it. Like I call my folks every day. Like I just have always been like that. I'm the oldest. And part of that too, like the great thing about the family is, I mean, I was doing a play this fall in Toronto and, my brother was quite ill at the time. And, so that was hard. He was here in Toronto. We were doing the show in Toronto, but of course, one of the blessings too is the theater community. My cast was, I think if I was doing a job, like, I don't know, working at, I was going to say stores, but they're all gone, like Le Chateau, but I don't even know if Le Chateau exists anymore. So let's say I was working at H&M, like, not to say that the staff wouldn't be great, but I really felt like that helped, having a family around a cast. So even though it was challenging and all encompassing, I felt like it helped me through that time. So,
yeah. Those families that are formed are pretty strong. And they don't necessarily, not just a cast. I remember a number of years ago doing a tour on the Fringe Festival, and somebody who was from out of the country, they were from Australia. They had to have their appendix out suddenly. And everybody was like, okay. So do we have to take collection after our show? Do we have to do this? Like everybody was ready to like pass the hat specifically for this person. After their shows to help pay for their hospital bills, which eternally nobody needed to do. So everybody was relieved, but it was like, everybody was just so ready to jump in and help. And I think that's one thing that the community is really good at.
Yeah, I agree. So much so. And I say too, like, I feel like I've chosen a profession where my heart leads me. And so that, like, in a way, that's also with my family. So it even though it's so strange because it's both two different worlds, but also they're very linked. And so that's, I feel very fortunate to be able to do that. Right.
One of the things that I love to do on this show is to hear about people's theater origin stories, like what brought you to the theater, what was your first experience, and how did you decide this was going to be the thing that you were going to do?
Well, I think my mom took me to see Annie at the then O'Keefe Centre. I remember where our seats were. We were on the aisle about the 11th row, and she took me, and I fell in love with it. Like we got the album, and I went home and like started singing it all the time. And my brother would be like, "Stop singing!" Like I would just be shouting like "Tomorrow" and "Maybe," like, because I was like, not only did I fall in love with musicals, but I always felt like I was the sort of artist kid in my family. And I was like, maybe I've been adopted and maybe that's why. And like, so it was like a double like whammy of like, I belong, street urchin, orphan. And I still love that score. I have the album. I have both the movie recording and the original cast album. I love that album. And so definitely so seeing that show, just, I don't know, that Yip Harburg quote about how a lyric helps you feel a thought. He talks about how like words, right? And like that lyrics make you feel so I think that was just, that synergy was gorgeous to me. And so I fell in love with that, and then got, I think Evita was the next cast album I got, singing at the top of my lungs, like just I was, I think like 12 or 13 singing Evita. And then, so I loved it. And I went to an arts high school. But I also really liked school. And so I actually thought I would become a lawyer. And I went to Queen's and didn't take drama. And then like within 2 weeks of being at school, like I was so miserable that I like auditioned for the school play, got to do Wizard of Oz. And I kind of didn't look back. And then I guess a year later, like because of my origin story with like a redheaded orphan, I went and crashed the auditions for Anne of Green Gables in Charlottetown, and that was my first job. So, yeah, and then it sort of became real.
Yeah. Now, you saw Annie. Had you seen Evita, or did you just discover the soundtrack?
I have never seen Evita. Oh, no, that's not true. When I was in Italy 25 years ago, I saw a touring production in Florence of Evita in English with Italian actors. But I had never seen it. I would go to the library a lot as a kid, and I got the, and those old albums would have all the lyrics on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got the original, the first one I listened to was the Julie Covington, the concept album. And so I just listened to that, and I just learned it. I knew Andrew Lloyd Webber was a composer, and I just loved it.
It's funny to me how sometimes those original cast recordings are gateways to the theater. They were my gateway to the theater back in 1970 when I was listening to soundtrack albums. My parents had Oklahoma, My Fair Lady, and Godspell, and those were like, I heard them, and then I started to piece together as a child. Oh, these have stories. This is a story. These songs lead into them, and I became fascinated by that, and that's kind of how I discovered theater, was through the cast recordings.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My parents, we had some Beatles albums. I think it was like the 1963 to 1966, like the red ones, and that for me was like, I think pre-Annie, the gateway, like, because there's such Lennon and McCartney, such good songwriters, right? And like even songs like Eleanor Rigby and Norwegian Wood as a kid, like they sort of touched something inside of me that. I loved Raffi too. I loved those albums, but these lyrics, like there was something about the story and the story songs that I loved, and I think and then ABBA. I remember we had an ABBA album as well, and hearing The Winner Takes It All. I mean, way before Mamma Mia, I found that song had such high drama. Like as a 10-year-old, I was in love. So I think those albums actually sort of set the stage, if you will, for those other albums to come in, and me to already have my appetite, a little whetted, like for story.
Yeah, storytelling is so powerful, and storytelling through song is even more powerful because the music helps tell the stories. So
that's right.
It's a powerful tool for telling stories.
Yep.
So you crashed the auditions for Anne of Green Gables. Aside from the book, were you familiar with the musical at that time, or was this like, had you heard this soundtrack, the story, or was it completely like you were just like, I know this is a show, I'm going to do it?
Kind of. Yeah. I did not know the musical. I didn't know anything about the musical. I knew it had been running for a long time. But I honestly think it was like, and I think this was like 94, where there was like a bit of a recession, if I'm not mistaken. Like people were having difficulty getting jobs at like TD Bank, I remember. And I knew those books so well, and I loved those books so well that I think it was, I just thought, I know this character, and I know, so I didn't know the musical at all. And then I remember getting a call back and having to learn a scene and a song. And I had to learn it for the audition. I had no idea. So it was really kind of trippy.
Did you know anything about auditioning at the time, or was it like, were you completely green?
I mean, the only audition, I had a horrific audition the year before, I remember, for Les Mis at the Neptune. And I didn't know that you're supposed to bring your music in a binder. I didn't know. I just brought a Sondheim collection. And like, oh my gosh. And like, she had to hold it open, but it kept falling on the ground. I mean, it was horrible. I felt so bad for that accompanist. And she did say to me very kindly, like, next time, put it in a book. So I did that, and I bombed it. And so, so it's funny because then when I did the Anne of Green Gables audition that I crashed, funnily enough, I brought a song from Evita, and I brought, which is maybe a little inappropriate, but I brought the mistress's song, like Another Suitcase in Another Hall. I mean, she's a mistress in Evita, but I was like, she's got a suitcase and she keeps singing, Where Am I Going To? And it's about somebody who keeps hoping against hope. So anyways, my sheet music was in the binder, and the wonderful Fen Watkin, who was a musical director there for many, many years in Charlottetown, played it beautifully. And I did that audition, and I remember I didn't have an agent at the time, and getting a call, I think about a month later, from the director, and he's like, "We'd like to offer you Anne." And I was like happy, and then I hung up because I was like, I don't know if he means the part or the show. Like I actually, so I called my mom, and my mom's like, "Well, you have to call him back." So I called him back and was like, "Do you mean the part? Because like I'm not really a dancer." And he's like, No, yeah, we want you to play Anne Shirley. So
That's a legitimate question, though. Like, because which is it going to be, the show and the character are named the same thing, right?
Well, and it's like, I teach, and I always feel like, oh, back in the day, because of course, if it was today, like maybe somebody wouldn't call, maybe I'd get an email, and the email would have the offer and it would say the role. But back in the, just get a phone call. And I think, to wonderful Jacques Lemai's credit, like Jacques called me, I mean, often the director doesn't call you to offer you the part, but I think he did that because he knew I was green. And I was at Queen's at the time, and one of my dear friends and professors basically served as my agent, because I didn't know, like, somebody's going to pay me to work. Like, we don't need to negotiate. So it was definitely like a huge learning experience for me.
Yeah.
To do that.
At that point, why would you even think that there's a negotiation? You get a job and they tell you what you're being paid, right? Isn't that what you do?
Exactly. And like, you're flying me there, and I get to stay in it. Like, great. Like, get to do what I love doing. Because I think even though I had thought about doing it, that was a real like turning point in my life. Like I really, that sort of, and I'll say too, like, as much as I loved being in Charlottetown, loved playing that part, loved the family of theater artists. Funny, my birthday was the other day, and two of the gentlemen on the crew there, who are both, one of them's in their late 80s and one of them's in their late 70s, sent me beautiful cards. Like, we're still dear friends, and we became friends 30 years ago, right? I lost my train of thought. That's what happens. What was I saying?
So. You were talking about the early days, the being in Charlottetown.
Just that. Right. That my teacher at the time had to. He was just basically, he served as my agent and negotiated, because I didn't even know that you could do what you love doing, get paid for it, go away. And I know what I was going to say, because even though I loved being out there, I will say it gave me. I really feel like one of the best things it gave me was that I went back to Queen's to do my third year and then my fourth year, having worked professionally. And I really felt like then I actually was like, I'm going to do just straight plays this year, straight plays, whatever that means. I'm going to do plays. I'm going to serve, because nobody's going to come review me in Kingston, right? Like, I'm going to take chances and fail, because maybe I'll have a career, maybe I won't, but let me I really enjoyed the sort of insular nature of being at a training institution, right? And sort of the cushion that allows you, and getting to take classes and, spread myself in other ways.
Now you started at the university in the law program, and were very quickly miserable. Did you immediately like switch out of the law program and go into the theater program, or did you stick it out for?
So I was in English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I did switch. I became a drama English major. So I did. Yeah, eventually switched. Yeah.
Right. Now, speaking of education, you're also a teacher. How long have you been a teacher for? What do you teach, and what drew you to teaching?
I guess I've been teaching for about 15 years now. Yeah. When I was at Queen's, there were a lot of my classmates who were in the concurrent education program there. So I wasn't in like a fine arts theater program. A lot of the students in my class didn't want to become actors, but wanted to become drama teachers. I love that, because I went to arts high school, and I've never been one for like competition makes me stronger. I'm pretty competitive within myself. I really loved that my program felt really like laid back in a way. But I never wanted to be a teacher when I was at Queen's. And I think part of it was I had some teachers when I was younger who said one or two things that really stuck with me. And I just thought, I don't want to, that responsibility feels too much. I don't want to like mess some kid up. So I stayed away from it. And then I guess when I got in my 30s, I was taking classes all through my 20s and 30s. If I was away, I would take class, and I love being in class. I still do. I still take class. And I took a class in New York that I really loved. I came back to Toronto, and my partner at the time was like, well, why don't you just teach the class that you took in New York? Teach the class you want to take. And it was huge. And so I just started, that's what made me decide to start teaching in a way, because I wanted to take a class. And I love it. I mean, I've been teaching my own class, which is sort of an acting through song, sort of what we talked about a little earlier, Phil. Also, from those days of, again, you can relate to this, like back in the day, there was no YouTube to look up songs. You'd go to the Toronto Reference Library, get some albums, sit at a station, go through the books. So I have kind of an encyclopedic knowledge of music theater rep. So one of the things I do is give people rep material. I also love shopping. I'll say, like, I love clothes shopping. And like, I also at one point wanted to be a personal shopper for someone. I feel like giving people songs is kind of like the personal shopper version of that, where, if you watch I think the good makeover shows, or the good makeovers are, you're not changing someone. You're just sort of bringing the things inside of them out, and things that make them feel more comfortable in their skin. So finding material and songs and stories for people that make them feel more themselves. And sometimes it means, let's take it down a semitone. And suddenly somebody opens up, or let's shift this around. So I've been doing that, and I teach for an organization in New York City as well, prepping high school kids to audition for college programs, and sort of teaching into directing. So I love, I feel like the years of acting. I also feel, I feel like there's some teachers that I've had that are no longer with us that have really impacted me in a great way. And so I do feel like this sort of lineage of what I can pass down to students through people who are no longer here, but through my voice, I can share some of their ideas. And
Yeah. Thinking back to those days of spending lots of time at the Metro Reference Library, for example.
Yeah.
And just like hours and hours and hours of like looking through plays, looking through like songs and trying to find the right song. And I think that finding the right song is a particular skill. I notice on Reddit, in the actors subreddit, a lot of times people are like, I want this role. What's the right song to sing for that? And I'm more of a lurker, but I always want to be like, no, that's the wrong way around it. You need to find the right song for you and not the song to get the role. Because otherwise you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot because you're not doing what's right for you.
What was your song, Phil? What was your song? Or what is your song? May I ask?
I haven't auditioned for a musical in so long. If I ever audition for a musical, it will be If the World Were Like the Movies from My Favorite Year.
That's a great show. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. I agree with you. Like, I agree with you. And yet I think, sometimes when somebody wants the part and they want a song like that, I think sometimes it's a song that has a similar vocal range maybe, or the quality of like if the character is a villain, they want to maybe pick a song that they get to exercise that within themselves. But I do think you can take a song, and there's one teacher that I studied with who believed you could take one song and, depending on the audition, change it. Like, change your point of view, change the person you're singing to, change even the vocal color of your voice to adapt it to a different circumstance,
That's really interesting because, obviously, the song is up for, you're interpreting the song.
Right.
I think a lot of times some of us get stuck on the way it's sung on the original cast recording. And you need to go past that and beyond that if you're listening to that.
That's right. I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, like, there's a song, do you know I Remember, the Sondheim song I Remember?
No.
It's from Evening Primrose.
Okay.
I remember sky, it was blue as ink.
Oh, yeah,
that one. And I remember doing a class once where I got everyone in the class to sing that song, just so I could show that it was a different interpretation, even if an actor didn't choose any, but just to have somebody sing that song, because all our memories are different. And so we remember different things. And the song was 8 different interpretations of that song because there were 8 different actors.
Right.
And that song, it's pretty melancholy, but if I was to say, you have to audition, that was your song and you had to audition for a character that was a bit of a villain, you could tilt that song a little bit to, it could be like, I remember this, hope they don't find out my master plan. Like there's ways of, that's kind of the creativity, right? It's like, okay, how do I make this fit this thing? And sometimes you can do that.
Well, it's also hard to find a song. Like a lot of times, listen, I've been on the other side of the table for auditions, and even if it's not a musical, you hear the same speeches over and over and over. And I'm sure that when musicals are happening, the unfortunate thing is you hear the same song over and over and over. And you would want the person who's interpreting the song, not the person who's regurgitating what it was like on the cast recording. And so your interpretation is super important.
Yeah.
Now, is that where teaching is concerned and directing is concerned? Because they can be close but different, right? Teaching and directing, because they lead to different things. Did teaching lead you to directing, or was directing something that sort of came along really separately?
Teaching led to directing for me. I think I've directed readings over the years. And sometimes when I would teach, I would think, is this me wanting to teach, or is this me wanting to direct? But it's like kind of the safe container, right, of a class where there's no audience. And I think in a way that's the best part for me about teaching a class, is that for the students as well, you don't have to worry about an audience and that response, right? It's a little bit of an incubator, playground. Well, when I got to direct my first sort of professional job a few months ago, I have to say, like, it was, I thought, why did I wait so long? Like, this feels so right, challenging. But in a way, I feel like, and I was nervous because I hadn't done it, but I felt like, wow, like 30 years of acting, that's nothing. Like, it's not nothing. Like bringing and working with all the directors I've gotten to work with. And I'm an actor who directors will tell you who work with me. I love asking questions. I ask lots of questions, no stone unturned. I love doing my research. I love doing certain things that sometimes as an actor, I worry if it's like too many questions and too many details. But as a director, those qualities, I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I love asking these questions. I love actors asking me questions, and the research, I really enjoy doing that part of it. And I've always been, I'm the eldest in my family. I've always been a bit of a connector. I've loved bringing people together. So the great thing, when I teach my class, I love getting wonderful accompanists to come in and sort of creating that vibe. And as a director, it was great because, I have a set designer and a costume designer and a lighting designer and a sound designer, and bringing people together and being at the helm of that, I really dug. I read a book that were interviews with female directors a few years ago, and it was inspiring to me because they talked about how that we need new models of directing, that it doesn't have to be like a tyrannical, like I tell you where to go, what to do, that actually that it can be a collaborative process. So that really heartened me in terms of like wanting to enter into an experience and it be a collaboration. I had wonderful actors who were great collaborators, and I also really loved like going, no, I want this sound cue like 2 points louder, this light 10% dimmer. It makes a difference. Like I have such great attention to detail, and it was okay to do that as a director, which I did. I love that sort of, if you will, that control of that, and learning, and I hadn't been in a cue to cue, but like knowing that when I saw it, my lighting designer, Jeff, was wonderful. He's like, you'll know when you see it. You'll know if it's to this, to that, and you learn as you go, which I think you do as an actor too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're mentioning about the process of rehearsal and how it doesn't have to be tyrannical. I think every actor has worked with both. They've worked with like a tyrannical person who is essentially like, we're going to move you around the stage like this, and I've got it written down. Everything is written down, and you're going to move like this. And we have other ones that are like, a little bit more free, a little bit more collaborative. I often, I think we all have our favorites and the ones that we've enjoyed more.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've been sort of interested in experimenting with in the rehearsal hall is trying to figure out, like at the beginning, like what does each person need to succeed? What does, what do we need to give you to succeed in this role, or what do you want to get from this production? And if it's just like, I'm just happy to be working, that's fine. But sometimes people want more. Sometimes people need more to succeed in the role. And how can we discuss that and support each person in the room for getting that? And I think that makes it a little bit more collaborative as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think first days are really important. My first day, like I really thought a lot about and we didn't have a lot of rehearsal time. And so the piece itself, it was a play called The Other Place, which is a beautiful piece of writing, but heavy. It asks the actors to go to challenging places. And so I felt like for me, my responsibility was like to foster and facilitate a space where actors felt safe to go there, and also to keep a sense of play. Sort of what we talked about earlier about the balance, right, of things. It always made me feel happy, like at lunch when I would hear the actors like laughing their heads off at in the green room. I was like, that's good, right? Because just that there's a spirit of that, and you can't force that, right? It's really challenging, and everybody is different on every day. So being in touch with that, and just trying to listen more. Like, I mean, I've been talking a lot here because it's an interview, I guess.
Yeah, it's an interview.
Right?
You're supposed to talk.
But I feel like this shift, and I won't say shift because I still love acting, but it feels like a bit of a paradox, because as a director, on some level, you feel like, well, I have to speak more because I'm directing. But I think for me, it's about, I get to have to listen more as a director and honing those skills, listening to my actors, listening to what even people are not saying, but feeling people's presence, and also within myself too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That essence of like the actors at lunch, they're laughing in the green room and that sort of thing. That can only happen when there's trust in the room, right? That can only happen when somebody isn't playing people against each other, when everybody is sort of getting along and things are warm. That's when that can happen. And that's when the family is formed. That's when it's a beautiful thing. It's so terrible when you're in the room and wherever it's coming from, some toxicity has come into the room, and that trust can't be there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd like to think that. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I think assembling, like I had an amazing stage management team, like, and this space you're in, and I was very like adamant about coffee and treats. You want people to. I mean, this goes back to Tim, who was my mentor in university, who was my agent when I was playing Anne. He would always bring loaves of bread and like pastries and like just food to rehearsal, and I think it's really smart, because on some level, even if the actors don't eat it, they just know that they're being taken care of a little bit. Not just as actors, but as like human beings who need to eat food and who sometimes don't have time to do that. And so just to have that there, I think is really important.
Yeah, so important that everybody feels taken care of. And if you can engender that, you've created a really great space. Now, just as we're sort of drawing to a close, one thing that I do want to make sure that we talk about are games. Because I know that that's a big part of that's something that you really love. Is it for you? Is it all games? Is it every game, or are there specific games that are like the ones that you really hold on to?
Well, so I'm a big baseball fan. I see your blue and red and white shirt, and I'm Blue Jays. That's all. I'm like, oh, it's the Blue Jays colors. So I'm a huge baseball fan. And I think, so I love the game. I think it's such an elegant game. I love the pace of it. I feel like I learn stuff from the game, but I also feel like a lot of those things can be related to like acting, and in terms of ensemble and in terms of focus. And yeah, so I love baseball. I watch Jeopardy every night. I love a quiz game. I've been going to quiz nights lately with my family. We're also big like Trivial Pursuit people. And I grew up playing cards with my grandparents. I mean, I think there's something about like all coming together to do something that's very focused. And laughter. Like, I feel like we're also a big euchre family. Like, we play euchre so we can like play euchre, make jokes. Like, yeah, we haven't done a lot of the like Settlers of Catan, like, are those like logic games, but games where we can sort of socialize and I mean, I'm an actor. I talk about my feelings a lot. Not everyone in my family is wired that way. Like,
right. Yes.
Right. But a game, I feel like, gives you like, it's almost like a bit of a script. It's a bit of a container, right? Where people feel safe within that. I ask the question, you do the answer. Maybe we'll improv a bit, but there's something about that I feel like very close to my family when we get to.
I know exactly what you mean about some members of the family not talking. My brother is not a big sharer of feelings.
Yeah.
And so I will always have to, like, if we get together and he's got stuff going on, he won't talk about it. I sort of have to like ease into it. We have to come over. We have to play some video games for about an hour, and then I can sort of like ease into the questions. But if it's just like jumping in, he won't go for it. So you have to like, I'm not tricking him, but we're lubricating, you know?
Right. Is he younger or older than you?
He's a year younger than me.
Yeah.
Now, the other board games. So you guys, I mean, sometimes you get into like a family thing, like Trivial Pursuit. Was Trivial Pursuit something you played like as a kid?
Yes, I played it from when I was like 12. So it was. So my two brothers, one of them a year and a half younger, one of them 9 years younger. And so when I was about 12, myself, my brother Alec, who was 10 and a half, and then my mom and my dad would play. So it was just us. And then as Peter grew up, we all played together as a family. And then our parents split up. But like during COVID, my brother Alec, his partner Roberta, and I would play with my mom every Friday night. Like, we did this for like over a year and a half. And yeah, it was so great. I mean, some of those questions, and we would go to Value Village and pick up, like, we have 9 different Trivial Pursuits now. Some are really hard, but it was great. I mean, so much, we would play for hours. Yeah.
You also have to pick up new packs because after a while you kind of know the answers to the questions, and it's not really fair anymore.
But there's a lot of questions. Like, there are those old ones. In the newer ones, they got a bit cheap, and like the decks are like half full, and but the older ones, like, they were chock full of those. So yeah, we did this thing, and my brother had this thing where, because one of the decks, you're right, didn't have a lot of cards, we would use the same card. Like, if you rolled again, and if you did the same category, then we'd give you a new card. But if not, we would stay on that same card, so we wouldn't go through it.
Yes, no, that's super important. Super important. I always had a problem with Trivial Pursuit, and just trivia in general. As you do, when you're in this industry, you pick up a whole lot of things. You sort of are a sponge, and so I know a lot of things. But if you ask me pointedly about one of those things, I forget entirely.
Yeah. You know what you do? It's funny. Like, the joke in my family, whether I was playing with my brother or my mom, is there would always inevitably be, it's either this or this, right? Like Romania or Ukraine. And we'd be like, okay, we would just roll the dice. If it's 1 to 3, it's Romania, 4 to 6, Ukraine. And I would say like 8 out of 10 times we'd get it wrong. Like, it would be the wrong one. But we would just be like, say it out loud and try to say it. And that's why you're your teammate would.
Right.
So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing Ingenue when it opens at the Red Sandcastle. Thanks so much. It's been great.
Thank you, Phil. It was a pleasure to talk to you and hang out for an hour.
This has been an episode of Stageworthy. Stageworthy is produced, hosted, and edited by Phil Rickaby. That's me. If you enjoyed this podcast and you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a 5-star rating. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Those reviews and ratings help new people find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. And remember, if you want to leave a tip, you'll find a link to the virtual tip jar in the show notes or on the website. You can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the complete archive of all episodes at stageworthy.ca. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. See you next week for another episode of Stageworthy.